Fees Amendment Regulations 2026.
I call the Minister to move the motion.
Mrs Jardine, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I beg to move that the committee has considered the draft Medical Devices Fees Amendment Regulations 2026. I'm grateful for the opportunity to open this debate on these regulations, which were laid before Parliament on the 16th of December 2025 and are due to come into force on the 1st of April 2026. The purpose of these regulations is to amend the Medical Devices Regulations 2002 and Medical Devices Northern Ireland Protocol Regulations 2021 and update their fee structure. They do this by introducing a new Medical Devices Registration Fee to provide additional funding for the MHRA's strengthened post-market surveillance, or PMS, of medical devices. On 1st April 26, the new annual fee will apportion the MHRA's PMS costs more fairly across the sector and replace the current per-application fee, which is insufficient to cover the costs of pre-market surveillance as we would wish to see it go into the future. For 2026-27, the fee will be part subsidised by the Department of Health and Social Care, with the intention that, subject to further ministerial and parliamentary approval, we move to a fully cost-recovering annual fee model from 27-28. I will start on why these regulations are necessary in a modern MHRA regulation framework. PMS refers to the work of the MHRA that it does to collect, review and act on safety and performance issues relating to medical devices on the market. The Independent Medicines and Medical Devices Safety Review highlighted the need for a high-quality medical devices PMS framework. A key part of the wider reforms developed in response to that review's recommendations was our PMS regulations, which came into force on the 16th of June last year. Those regulations strengthen the medical devices safety and surveillance framework, improve patient safety and support the MHRA's more risk-proportionate, more innovation-friendly approach to regulation. They are also estimated, though, to increase PMS workload by 60 to 70% at an annual cost of around £17 million. So finding a sustainable funding model is vital. Historically, MHRA Devices PMS has been funded mainly by a subsidy from the Department of Health and Social Care and partly by the current per-application fee model. Subsidising ongoing regulatory activity through general taxation is not the MHRA's usual approach to fees and services. The usual approach is based on His Majesty's Treasury's Managing Public Money Guidance, which states that fees should be set on a full cost recovery basis. Therefore, these regulations reduce subsidy by introducing a direct annual registration fee, so those who benefit from access to the market fund the regulatory activity that underpins it. I will now explain how the regulations are intended to operate in practice. The new annual fee apportions the overall cost of the MHRA's PMS activities by using the Global Medical Device Nomenclature System, or GMDN, as I will reference it from here in. The GMDN system is a globally recognised system for naming and classifying medical devices. It is hierarchical, with broader groupings at higher levels. For example, Level 2 is a category and more granular than entries at lower levels, where Level 5 is an individual GMDN term. Medical devices are registered with the MHRA using a GMDN code and prior to placing the devices for use on the market. The MHRA hosts a register of devices called the Device Online Registration System. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, another acronym, also known as DORS. The register is a valuable resource to monitor devices that are in circulation and to know when devices have concerns around their uses. The proposed fee will be calculated using information from DORS. In practice, the MHRA will charge based on the number of chargeable GMDN Level 2 categories a manufacturer's registrations fall into. If a manufacturer has multiple devices within the same Level 2 category, importantly, they will only be charged once per year for that category. As the GMDN system is already in use for device registration, this approach also limits administrative burden because the fee can be calculated from using existing data rather than requiring additional information from the manufacturer, and therefore is less onerous. The MHRA consulted widely on this fee as part of its last statutory fees uplift and updated its approach based on stakeholder feedback. The consultation ran for 2 months, from August to October 2024, and it was widely promoted and supported by a small and medium-sized enterprise webinar. In the consultation, the annual fee was proposed at £210 per GMDN Level 5 term, using the most granular 5th level of the GMDN structure. Most respondents did not support the proposal. 72% were opposed, 18% had no opinion, and 10% supported it. Their concerns focus on the introduction of a new annual cost at short notice and the risk of a disproportionate impact on our SMEs and on areas that attract more GMDN registrations, such as in vitro diagnostics and surgical instruments, something close to my heart. In response to feedback, several changes were made. The MHRA set up a confidential, trusted advisory group of industry representatives to discuss the approach and seek further advice on implementation. This was welcomed by the members and provided useful feedback and assurance. The fee is being rolled out in a phased way to give the sector time to adapt in response to their needs. The costs have been fully subsidised in 25-26, and this instrument introduces a part subsidised annual fee from 26-27, with the intention to moving to a fully cost recovering annual fee model from 27-28, subject, as I said before, to further ministerial review and parliamentary approval. The fee was remodelled to be charged at GMDN category level 2 rather than level 5. This is a higher, more general level, and it results in the costs being more equitably spread. Overall, the MHRA estimates, crucially, that 56% of manufacturers will only pay £300 a year, and 82% of manufacturers will pay no more than £900 per year. SMEs, crucially, are more likely to only pay £300 a year, as they are likely to have a more limited range of products compared to the larger companies. To put this into some kind of further context, the medical technology sector generated £48 billion of turnover in 23-24, and the total post-monitoring surveillance cost was £17 million, representing 0.035% of total revenue. I believe this is a good example of using consultation feedback and stakeholder engagement to improve a proportional and modifying the fee structure to be more equitable and proportionate. I recognise manufacturers will always, of course, prefer to avoid additional costs, but I am satisfied that moving to a fair and crucially predictable cost recovery approach to fund ongoing PMS is the right thing to do, and the changes made help to address the key concerns raised. Finally, the MHRA has been working to help the wider medical technology sector to prepare for this change. The phased rollout has given the sector time to adjust and get ready. The MHRA has published guidance explaining the new fee, how it will be calculated, what account holders need to do to ensure the registration data is accurate, and how and when the payment needs to be made. The MHRA is improving functionality of its DORS system so account holders will be able to see their chargeable GMDN categories, helping them understand and check what they will be charged for in advance to give them additional certainty. This new functionality will be ready for 1st April 2026, and in the meantime, the MHRA has emailed all manufacturers directly with an estimated fee based on their registrations of November 25. In summary, Ms Jardine, these regulations introduce a necessary and fair annual registration fee from 1st April 2026 to help fund the MHRA's strengthened PMS ambitions as well as its regulatory ambitions to make this country the world leader in life sciences in the medical technology sector. The approach has been improved in response to consultation feedback and is being introduced in a phased way to give maximum time to the sector to adapt while ensuring the MHRA has the resource it needs to protect patients and maintain confidence in our growing market. For those reasons, I commend these regulations to the committee.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft Medical Devices Fees Amendment Regulations 2026. Opposition spokesperson Dr Canlin Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's a pleasure to serve under chairmanship this afternoon. Madam Chair, I agree that post-market surveillance is important for patient safety, but also that predictability for business is important, as is reducing the burden on businesses. Now, on the 12th of May last year, the Minister, the member for Bristol South, said that the SI we discussed then would increase the fees across the MHRA for devices from June 2025. They included fees for various things, but most of which were increased by 9 and 16%, but some, such as clinical investigation charges, were increased very much more. She said at that time that this would ensure cost recovery until 2027. And of course, we're now January 2026, and we're back for more money. Why is that? Why is the government back for more money? They did increase the fees for Regulation 53, which is the regulation affected today, from 240 to 261 back in June, and they plan to increase it again. Let's consider why. In May, I raised some questions regarding the impact assessment produced for that legislation for two reasons. Firstly, it didn't appear that the national insurance increase nor the reduction in the national insurance threshold had been accounted for in the calculations. Secondly, the impact assessment assumed a 2.2% pay rise for civil servants for the years 24-25 to 26-27. Even then, that was a level that was below inflation. Regarding staff costs, the Minister said that she thought they were NHS staff, but she did later write to me to confirm the NAC hikes were payable by the MHRA because their staff are civil servants. In response to my written questions, the Minister declined to say if national insurance were included, but assured the House that the MHRA had modelled future costs, the uplift would be enough till April 2027, and the MHRA would find efficiency savings, if required, to manage any future shortfalls. I asked the MHRA by FOI what increases they faced in national insurance costs as a result of reduction in the thresholds and increasing the rate. They said a yearly cost of £1.9 million. I asked what estimate the MHRA additional costs arising from the difference between the actual pay in the impact assessment and the actual pay rise which was given. The answer was the costs for that were 1.2 million. So that's a shortfall of 3.1 million, or 20% of the increase in fees from the last SI, Madam Chair. They said at the time that they believed that while this extra cost in national insurance was not included in our fees cost recovery method, approved fees are still efficient to cover projected costs over the next 2 years without any negative impact on service delivery or financial sustainability. And I should also mention, Madam Chair, that this particular letter was dated the 1st of August 25, which is after the PMS legislation that we're talking about today came into effect. There was a significant difference between the calculations that the MHRA produced and the figures that were the 3.1 million, which begs the question of accuracy and the projection of the grip the government has both on the detail and on our public finances. And the government is here again now to want a registration fee increasing by 15% more to £300, but with no impact assessment this time. But not only do these regulations increase the registration fee by 15% from the 4th of from April 26th, they also add a maintenance fee of £300 per each device for a category listed. This is starting with a fee period immediately following that, in which the person paid the fee for the device registration due on the first period, which would seem to mean that if a device is registered between now and April, they pay £261 now, Madam Chair, and £300 on the 1st of April, presumably incentivising delaying any registrations at the moment. I can see that the Minister has adjusted for this in future years, but he doesn't seem to have done so for those registering this year. The estimate for the increase in post-marketing surveillance of 17 million that the Minister mentioned, I'm interested in how sure he is that that's a robust figure, given that we are back 6 months after they were sure they had enough. This year, I understand the plans, the de minimis assessment says that 6 million will come from grant and aid from DHSC, 6 million from grant and aid from DHSC, 4.9 million from DHSC financial support, and 6.1 from the fee income. The current registration fees are predicted to produce 1.6 million, leaving a difference of 4.5 to be gapped by increasing fees. The de minimis assessment's best estimate says they need to make 4.3 of that, which is £300 a year on each of the devices in the way the Minister described. But it also says we plan to seek approval for full cost recovery for subsequent years, which the Minister has confirmed is his plan today. Why is that not in today's regulation? Is that because it would have required an impact assessment? How much will this cost business? This will be a further £10.9 million, and if £300 a year will get the Minister £6.1 million. Then for £17 million, he will need around 836, which is a massive increase on business coming down the track next year, which is not fully considered, I don't think. Burdens on business are important because they stifle activity in business, they stifle innovation. This government has already added significant burdens to business: higher taxes and national insurance rates, reduction of the national insurance threshold, the Employment Rights Act, and for family-owned businesses, the business property relief. Now it's adding further costs. And I'm concerned, Madam Chair, about the effects on innovation, on early access of devices for patients. What has the Minister assessed from international comparators? We've seen in recent times loss of pharma investment in the UK. Will the extra fees this year and the prospects of hikes next year deter investment? Well, there's no impact assessment, so how can we be sure? I'm particularly concerned about small businesses and micro businesses. The de minimis assessment says it's not possible to exempt micro businesses. Why is it not possible? It's a political choice not to exempt them, but it's certainly possible to produce regulations which do. The consultation, as the Minister described, had widespread concern with only 10% support. Changes have been made following discussion with the Trusted Advisory Group. Who is in the Trusted Advisory Group? What voice of micro and small businesses were heard in that group? There's been no further consultation and no impact assessment on the regulations he's presented today. I also have some specific questions about obsolescence, Madam Chair. The need to pay a registration maintenance fee for putting on the market a product to sell or lease. This was previously a single charge which lasted the lifespan, however long that lifespan would be. There is now an annual fee. What provision is made for the clinical use and post-market surveillance of items that cease to be registered? Because a company goes bust? Because a company stops selling the item? Can the item still be used? How would a clinician know that the lapse of previous licence had stopped? Particularly if this was a personal piece of medical equipment, perhaps such as a stethoscope. How does this affect post-marketing surveillance? Could registration be discontinued by some items, where someone has several categories possible, in order to register another category to force obsolescence? For example, I've seen in a trust where the failing to produce spare parts led to an entire trust having to replace every single defibrillator at great expense. If a company went bankrupt and they were no longer able to pay their post-marketing surveillance fee, then the item would no longer be registered. So how does that work? I also want to ask about the category. Originally, as in consultation as described, the GMDN category was level 5, which is extremely specific. Now it's level 2, which is better, but micro businesses still pay the same charge as larger businesses. So a business selling one product would pay the same as a business selling dozens of products in the same category. Also, there's no accounting for the size of the product or the sort of surveillance required. For example, the charge for an MRI scanner worth £2 million would be the same as a single-use scalpel worth less than £1. Is that fair? I appreciate people may sell more scalpels than scanners, but what about an umbilical artery dilator, of which not too many are used, at £24 each? Producers of inexpensive but highly specific and useful devices may be disadvantaged. What will be the effects on costs and patients? Again, there's no impact assessment, so we don't know. How much of the cost that has been produced by these regulations does the Minister expect to be transferred back to the government in paying for more expensive devices? Overall, Madam Chair, there are many, many, many more questions than answers raised by these regulations. Patient safety is paramount. There is, of course, a cost to ensure devices are properly and proportionately regulated. It is also the government's need to be responsible with and careful with money. But the regulations as they are a blunt tool, adding cost to business and the promise of much more cost to come. There is no proper impact assessment. There is a risk to small and micro businesses and inexpensive low-volume items. As such, I cannot support the regulations today.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm very glad to be here today speaking about medical devices, life sciences, because not only is this solving many of the problems we're facing as a country, like antimicrobial resistance, but it's also treating diseases, but it's a fantastic way of growing our economy as well. And we very much welcome the fact the government have acknowledged that the initial plans would have disproportionately affected small and medium-sized businesses, and obviously, like all SMEs around the country, they're really struggling with everything from energy prices soaring, like national insurance, and dealing with Brexit red tape as well. So it's vital we reach a balance on this, and it seems that the Minister spoke very well on this. It's imperative that funding is sufficient for the MHRA to effectively regulate the market. We also don't want to deter medical technology companies from investing in the UK, and that's why we've been continually calling for a bespoke customs union with the EU to slash the red tape and to have a major boost to research and development funding, all which would hugely benefit the Life Sciences Centre. I'd be grateful if the Minister could confirm they're fully confident that there's some sort of impact assessment or study to show that the adaptive fee structure will not be overly punitive on businesses, SMEs in particular, and won't end up inadvertently reducing the investment and growth of medtech in the UK.
Tom Collins.
Thank you, Chair. I am very pleased to see that the government has taken this approach of listening carefully, responding, and trying to build a solution that's manageable and predictable with a phased transition. As an engineer, safety of products, I know, absolutely is paramount, and features like post-market surveillance are incredibly important, as well as the rest of a good regulation system. And so I'm really pleased to see the government taking this seriously, thinking about it carefully, and making sure primarily that patients remain safe. I would like to raise one specific case where there are implications for patients that are particularly significant. People who rely on continuous insulin therapy, for example, people with type 1 diabetes, rely on their devices, insulin pumps primarily, to live their daily lives. Their interaction with the pump is frequent, their relationship is a deep one, that device plays a very significant role in their life. People will often keep an insulin pump for a number of years and become very, very familiar with its operation. And it's important to note that these devices are increasing in sophistication. In recent years, we've seen some incredible advances in technology, such as continuous glucose monitoring, or CGM, and now we're starting to see more and more pumps on the market which provide closed-loop control, where the delivery of insulin responds in real time to the patient's blood glucose level. That has been a transformative technological step forward, but it puts a lot more sophistication onto these devices and a lot more integration with other devices such as the CGMs. That means that the patient's relationship with that pump gets even more sophisticated and deep, and their ability to manage their healthy lifestyle depends very critically on that device and their relationship with it. It also means increasingly that they are dependent on an online platform and a continuous service agreement to maintain use of those systems and their integrations. My concern is that if we now introduce a way for a registration to expire early or for its maintenance not to be renewed, this could create a sense of insecurity or some practical insecurities for patients with their insulin pumps. Despite the fact that for an individual medical device, these fees are indeed modest, especially when you put them in context. You can also imagine situations where unscrupulous manufacturers might decide that withdrawing a product early suits their product roadmap and their profit margins. And it's very important that patients understand that they are safe and that we've mitigated these types of risk and that they have control over when and how they change their pump technology, and that it's not going to be taken away from them for any reason, particularly commercial reasons that are outside their control. I am confident that these risks can be managed and mitigated alongside this regulation coming into effect, working with the NHS. And I'm very, very grateful for the open and collaborative response I've had from the Minister and from the Government up until now on this topic. I'd like to put it on the record that it's important that we go and investigate these potential impacts on this particularly vulnerable group of users and make sure that they are not compromised or put at a disadvantage as we introduce this very important and valuable regulation.
Minister Dr. Ahmed, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll first turn to my honourable friend from His Majesty's opposition. She is a scholar of medicine, as I am, and she has practised in the NHS through the entirety of the 14 years of the last government, and so she will know, possibly firsthand, that the MHRA for a long time has been a regulatory body that is not fit for purpose, that has lagged behind the inventions and the innovations that are now available to patients, particularly in medical technology. And she will know it is this government that is placing the MHRA at the service of patients by being bold in its reforming agenda in terms of its leadership that it's showing as to how it regulates medical technology. And the proof point of that reform is our consultation with trusted groups, including trade associations such as the ABHI, the BIVDA and the BDA, who were consulted extensively over the course of these regulatory proposals, and whom I engage on a regular basis to garner their support so that every step of the way our life sciences sector plan is facilitated by our regulatory institutions and authorities. Indeed, the MHRA was present last week in front of a number of innovative biotechnology companies, and the message was loud and clear from them. They see and view the UK's regulatory framework as first in class, as innovative, as forward-thinking, and see it as an attractive proposition, therefore, to invest in our country. In terms of impact assessment, can I assure her and the Honourable Member for Worcester that we are not avoiding impact assessment. We are, in fact, supporting industry with a phased approach on fees, and we are open to an ongoing consultation and dialogue as this fee structure comes into place next year and the year after. To my honourable friend, the member for Worcester, he is also a learned member of this House, and I take on board entirely his comments regarding insulin pumps, and whatever possible, the discussions I've had with my officials, with the MHRA, is that this fee structure, as much as possible, should include the totality of a device rather than its component parts, and I'm very happy to take his comments back to my officials so we can make sure that he and his constituents are satisfied that there are no unintended consequences in that regard. Can I thank all honourable members for the contributions once again to this debate, and thank you, Madam Chair. I want...
I noticed that the Minister has made a great speech, but he hasn't answered lots of the questions, and I appreciate he may not have all the answers, so if he could commit to answering them by letter. And if you can now talk about the possible of obsolescence. If an item ceases to be registered, and you're encouraging people to deregister things that they're no longer selling, if an item becomes deregistered, can it still be used in the NHS? And how would a doctor know whether something had ever been registered in the past and was safe?
I'm happy to write to her to give her a more fulsome answer. She knows that procurement in different parts of the NHS is rightly reflective of local clinical practices, although there are overall national frameworks for buying such products, and that innovation lends itself to the fact that over time patients will want to choose and move on to newer forms of devices that regulate and treat their conditions in line with latest clinical evidence. But I'm very happy to write to her more extensively regarding obsolescence and the thesis of questions that she has asked me during the course of her contribution. I just want to, if I could, Madam Chair, raise some points regarding the following topics: the impact on SMEs, the impact on market attractiveness more extensively, GMDN suitability and transparency, give some more clarity on the costs, look at value for money and evaluation, and also just make up some points regarding Northern Ireland. On SMEs, as the Honourable Lady has highlighted, I recognise new regulatory costs can be felt a bit more sharply with smaller firms, and the MHRA has listened carefully. This is why the fee has been designed to spread costs more equitably across the sector. Like I say, the majority will only pay £300 per year. Following consultation feedback, charging is based on the number of GMDN Level 2 categories a manufacturer's registered devices falls into, rather than the much more granular Level 5. That matters for SMEs because they are more likely to have a closely related product variants that may attract multiple Level 5 terms, but more generally sit within a single Level 2 category. Under this approach, therefore, multiple products in one Level 2 category are charged once per year, reducing the need for repeat charges on minor product variations. The MHRA estimates that around 56% of manufacturers will pay a single unit fee, therefore £300 a year, and SMEs like I say, are most likely to fall into this group because they typically have a narrower product range than the larger companies. The MHRA is not offering waivers or special SME rates. The charge is designed to be proportionate, and any waivers would simply shift costs elsewhere. The intention is to keep the charge predictable and proportionate and to phase it in. And finally, SMEs stand to benefit from a stronger PMS framework, leading to earlier identification of issues, fewer surprises, and a more risk-proportionate, predictable regulatory approach that supports responsible innovation. I must make it clear, Madam Chair, we are not asking for more money. We are simply changing the MHRA's regulatory framework to put it on a more sustainable footing so that going forward it is less reliant on the taxpayer and therefore more pro-innovation, more pro-market, and be able to have a healthier commercial relationship with new as well as established companies. On innovation and UK attractiveness, a robust PMS framework is not a brake on innovation, far from it. It helps to make the market more predictable and indeed investable, as per my conversations over the last couple of weeks with major and minor and smaller biotech industry firms. In developing this instrument, the Secretary of State must have regard to these three considerations set out in the Medicines and Medical Devices Act 2021. Safety, availability, and the attractiveness of the whole of the United Kingdom as a place to research, develop, manufacture, and of course crucially supply medical devices. This fee supports safety by ensuring the MHRA has sustainable funding for strengthened PMS so risks can be identified and acted on sooner. It supports availability by underpinning a stable and predictable system of oversight that helps maintain continued safe access and to devices, and effective devices at that. And it's...
When you tell us this post-market surveillance, does it continue if the device ceases to be registered?
The anticipation would be that the post-market surveillance will continue if devices are still used in a clinical setting. And it supports UK attractiveness by strengthening confidence in the market, patients, clinicians and investors, and by resourcing a more risk-proportionate, innovation-friendly approach to regulation, including making better use of real-world evidence and enabling more flexible, efficient regulatory processes over time. A stronger PMS framework also reduces uncertainty for innovators by enabling earlier proportionate action and helping to avoid sudden escalations that can disrupt plans or supply. By improving real-world evidence and post-market data, it also strengthens confidence in the UK as a place to generate evidence, invest, and bring new devices to patients. A number of members, including the Honourable Member opposite, have raised questions about the global medical device nomenclature as the basis for apportioning costs. GMDN is internationally recognised for naming and grouping medical devices, and it's already used for UK device registration through the DORS since 2018. Using GMDN categories means the fee can be calculated from information manufacturers already provide, making it less onerous rather than creating a new system for reporting requirements purely for charging purposes. That helps to minimise administrative burden across the sector, including for SMEs. Category-based charging is also a practical and broadly proportionate proxy for the breadth of device and types a manufacturer places on the market and therefore the likely level of PMS activity. It avoids a per-device approach and the complexity and burden in trying to calculate an actual PMS cost for each manufacturer. On transparency, the MHRA is improving DORS so account holders can see the chargeable GMDN Level 2 categories linked to the registrations as of 1st of April. Ahead of the go-live, MHRA has written directly, like I said, to all manufacturers with their estimated fees so they can check in advance the registration data and plan their budgets accordingly. On clarity of costs, the consultation proposed an annual fee of £210 per year per GMDN term at level 5. The feedback, although was clear though, that this would be disproportionate as level 5 is more granular in some areas than others, exposing SMEs and manufacturers of devices such as IVDs and surgical instruments to higher costs. In response, the MHRA redesigned the fee, so its charging now is based on the GMDN Level 2 category, which is much broader and consistent across product ranges. The unit price is higher because there are fewer Level 2 categories than Level 5, so the amount to recover is spread across fewer units, and the cost base has been updated to reflect inflation since the consultation. The fee is also being introduced through a phased approach to give manufacturers time to adapt. The PMS has been fully subsidised by the DHSC in the year 25-26, and this instrument introduces a part subsidised annual fee model by 26-27. The intention is to move to a fully cost recovery annual fee from 27-28 once the new arrangements are embedded and a full impact assessment can be prepared. On value for money and evaluation, the main objective of strengthening post-market surveillance is to improve health outcomes by increasing the quality and quantity of safety and performance data and reducing the time from identifying a risk to making a corrective action. That supports patient safety and continued access to safe, effective devices, and it enables a more risk-proportionate, pro-innovation approach to regulation by strengthening the evidence base and supporting earlier proportionate action where needed.
Thank you. Can I ask the Minister, if a device ceases to be registered, can a doctor still use it in the NHS? Legally.
As she knows, doctors are able to, in certain circumstances, prescribe unlicensed treatments to their patients if they feel it is a proportionate act to take. It is not something that is in guidelines or routinely recommended, but it is at times under the discretion of individual clinicians. Clearly, that would be a peripheral activity and something that need to be looked at by local governance processes, but I'm confident that these regulations strengthen the current post-market surveillance, and so we are moving from a place of greater safety to where we are now for the totality of the system. Madam Chair, as I was saying, our measures supports patient safety whilst supporting continued access to safe, effective devices, and it enables a more risk-proportionate, pro-innovation approach to regulation by strengthening the evidence base and supporting earlier where proportionate actions are needed. The fee funds around 102 staff working across key areas, including medical device safety and surveillance yellow card, software and diagnostics, and compliance and safety data. Roughly 3/4 of these posts are existing roles previously funded through the DHSC subsidy, with around 1/4 being new posts that the MHRA expects to have fulfilled by the end of March 26. Performance will be monitored for indicators such as the volume and quality of vigilance reporting, field safety corrective action and trend reporting, signal detection, and timeliness from initial signal through to alerts and the corrective action being applied. The MHRA is committed to strengthening its internal metrics and producing new KPIs to track performance. Fees will be reviewed through the biennial fees uplift process to ensure costs remain efficient and proportionate and to avoid over or under recovery. I want to, Madam Chair, just turn briefly to Northern Ireland. As you know, the regulatory position is different from Great Britain under the Windsor Framework. The EU devices regulations apply in Northern Ireland. This means devices placed in the NI market must meet relevant EU requirements. The European Commission has recently announced EUDAMED registration will become mandatory by May 26. EUDAMED is the European Commission's database that collects and stores data about devices in the EU and Northern Ireland market. It is free for users it is funded by centrally by the European Commission. In practice, this means manufacturers or the representatives of these devices, other than the ones custom made, that are placing them on the EU or NI markets must register these devices on EUDAMED by 28 May 2026. Out of a desire to avoid duplicative obligations, we are taking forward a separate piece of regulation that will mean on 28 May 26, devices other than custom-made ones placed on the NI market will need to be registered with EUDAMED and will no longer need to be registered with the MHRA, so the fee will not apply. Under EU regulations, custom-made devices are excluded from EUDAMED. They still need to be registered with the MHRA and will incur the fee. Taken together, these regulations put the funding of the strengthened PMS on a clearer, more sustainable footing, so those who benefit from access to the UK market contribute fairly to the ongoing regulatory work that supports their access. The fee has been redesigned in response to consultation feedback, is being phased in to give the sector time to adapt, and uses existing registration data to keep administrative burden on business low. Ultimately, this is about maintaining confidence in the safety and performance of medical devices, supporting continued access, and ensuring the MHRA has the capacity to act quickly and proportionately when issues may arise. If there are any detailed points I have not addressed and I have taken on board the Honourable Lady's comments, I am happy to write to her and the committee with that information. For those reasons, for the which I have already highlighted, I invite the committee to support these regulations for the sake of patients, safety and our commercial environment, and I commend them to the committee.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft medical devices fees amendment regulations 2026. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no.
No.
Division. Are we happy to lock the doors, or do you want to wait 2 minutes? Lock the doors. Lock the doors, please. Just in case.
Dr. Zabir Ahmed.
Aye.
Stuart Anderson.
No.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Aye.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Abstain.
Tom Collins.
Aye.
Tracy Gilbert.
Aye.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
No.
Sonia Kumar.
Aye.
Stephen Morgan.
Aye.
Steve Race.
Aye.
Dr. Neil Shastri-Harris.
No.
Gregory Stafford.
No.
Michelle Welsh. Nadia Watone. Mohammed Yassin.
Aye.
Steve Yan.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The ayes were 11 and the noes 4, so the ayes have it. Unlock. Order. Order. Thank you.